Hey, hope you're doing well. Andy here from Drive Steady, and in this video I'm reviewing a Mercedes Benz AMG CLA 45. But before getting started, a huge thank you to Keys Mercedes for allowing me to review this car today. Keys Mercedes has been a Southern California dealer, or one of the largest Southern California dealers, for quite some time now. They've got a huge inventory of cars ranging from the GTR all the way to the A series, and we'll be getting the new S-Class here very soon. So if you happen to be interested in a Mercedes, I have put their information down in the description below. Make sure you contact Alex and he will be glad to take care of you. Now, getting back to the CLA 45, it's the top of the line trim for the CLA model in the Mercedes lineup, and it has the world's most powerful 4-cylinder mass series produced engine. Now, I know that's a lot, but this car has almost 400 horsepower from a 4-cylinder 2-liter engine. That's almost 200 horsepower per liter. It's truly remarkable what Mercedes has done with this engine. Now, beyond that, the CLA also received a redesign. This is a brand new design from Mercedes. This is in its second generation, and I'm glad to see that Mercedes really cleaned this thing up, because in my opinion, the first generation kind of was missing something. I don't know if it was proportions or just overall design. It didn't really sit well with me, but I'm glad to say that the CLA, the second generation, is a very clean and aggressive design. Going back to that original CLA, I remember the marketing behind it. It was get a Mercedes Benz for under $30,000. But those times have passed, because the introduction of the A series has bumped the CLA up in the pecking order. The CLA has gotten a little bigger, it's a little bit more serious. So in this video, I'm going to review the AMG CLA 45 and give you my thoughts on if it's a real deal AMG. All right, so let's start off the review by talking about the exterior, more specifically the front end. And before getting into much detail, when I first saw this car, the first thing I noticed was, man, this thing really looks like an AMG GT, the 4-door version. And I think I was right, because when I looked at that car and I went and I looked at an AMG GT, they're very similar, and Mercedes actually did that on purpose. That's by design. So these two cars resemble each other very closely, at least from the front end. Now let's get into a little bit more detail. Looking at the hood, there's a power bulge here that's getting pretty common in German cars. It's 2 lines here in the center, and there's 2 lines that flow into the side of the car. The hood design is actually really nice. Then let's go down to this grille area, and here is something where it gets more inspiration from some of the higher AMG trim levels. This is called the Pan America grille. It's on the AMG GT 4-door, it's on the 2-door, it's on all of the major AMG models. So that goes to show you that this AMG 45 or CLA 45 is a real deal AMG. When you compare this one to the CLA 35, which is the trim beneath it, the front grille looks completely different. And this one actually looks really good. Nothing taking away from the 35, but this is the real deal AMG front end. So now let's get a little bit closer and talk about these beautifully designed headlights. They're triple beam, multi-beam LEDs, as Mercedes calls it. It's got a little Mercedes Benz insignia here. The running lamps are really cool. There's one running across that's more pronounced, and then there's a small one that runs right underneath there. It's a really clever, very cool design. Typically you just see one LED running lamp going across, but Mercedes has kind of put a little extra flair on there for you to distinguish it from other models. And then we come down to the lower part of the bumper here. You can see that the CLA 45 has massive grille openings, and that's to cool that 2-liter engine, because this thing is really high strung. It needs a lot of gas and it needs a lot of air to remain reliable. So these big openings here, you can see, are painted in a black color. That's because this car has the AMG Night Package. If it didn't have the AMG Night Package, they would be painted in this denim blue exterior color, which, by the way, is a really nice looking color. And speaking of the AMG Night Package, it adds a couple other things like black mirror caps and a more aerodynamic, more pronounced wing in the back, which we'll get to once we get to the rear of the car. But there is an additional package on this car called the AMG Aerodynamics package, and it adds these little canards on the side of the front bumper for the CLA 45. In addition to that, it makes the front a little bit more pronounced and a little bit more aggressive. They're not overly done, and sometimes what you see are these humongous canards on the side of the car that really kind of make it look too racerish for the street. So here you can see the side profile of the AMG CLA 45, and I'm not going to spend too much time here, but the thing I wanted to remind you of is that the CLA 45 is considered a coupe, and the reason for that is because of this sloping roof. Remember, Mercedes pioneered this segment of a four-door coupe with the CLS, and this is somewhat the entry-level version of that. But the difference with the CLA and the CLS is that the CLS seats 4 people. It's got a center section in the back 2 seats, but the CLA 45 can seat 5 people. It does not have that midsection. So it's just another technicality about the coupe CLA 45. All right, so now let's talk about the wheels, tires, and brakes on this CLA 45. Standard, you get a 19-inch wheel, but it's a more traditional 5-spoke design. These are optional and more common amongst all of the other AMG cars. They're beautifully designed multi-spoke wheel, 19 by 9 on all 4 corners. Wrapping them are Michelin Pilot 4S tires, 255/35 again on all 4 corners. Moving inside the wheel barrel, you have a 13.8-inch slotted brake disc or brake rotor biting onto by a 4-piston AMG brake pad. It's got the AMG lettering on it. It's a really nice looking brake. On the rear, 13 inches, single piston AMG caliper. And as you'll see during the driving review, the brakes on this car actually perform admirably. So now we're on the rear end of the CLA 45, and I wanted to correct myself because earlier on I mentioned that this wing is a part of the Night Package. It's not. As a part of the Aerodynamics package, you get a more pronounced wing. And I must say this wing looks really good. It's not too big and it's not too small. I think it's the perfect size. It's got a nice shape and it flows really nicely with the rear end of the car. Now let's move on to the badging here, CLA 45, AMG over there on the other side, and these tail lights. These look really nice. They're all LED. They have a really interesting shape on how they start really narrow and kind of open up into the side of the car and then again get really narrow. It's a beautiful piece. I like the way Mercedes is doing their headlights and their taillights nowadays. Now moving to the trunk, it opens in an interesting way. You can obviously do it with a button on the inside. There's a button on the key, but let's say you come back here and you want to open it. How do you open it? There's no button down here that you typically see. There's no key opening. So how do you do it? You push on this Mercedes badge here, and that opens it up. Once you open it up, you've got a lot of storage room back here in the CLA 45. In addition to that, to expand your cargo room even further, you have these latches that pull down the rear seat, giving you much more room in the trunk. Now about closing the trunk, one pet peeve of mine is getting my fingerprints on the car. And this is called the closing latch for the trunk test, for the lack of a better term. I saw this for the first time in the AMG GTR. It had a little handle here that allowed you to close the trunk without getting your hands onto the exterior paint. The CLA 45 also has that. So you put your hand in here, you use a little bit of force, close the trunk without having to get your fingerprints on the car. Now let's move on to the rest of the rear end. You can see that there are these 2 scoops on the side of the car. They're fake, they're not allowing any air through, so I'm sad to see that. It's really just an aesthetic piece. Then you go down to the exhaust section. This is where it gets a little more interesting. There's a very aggressive diffuser down there. It's a 4-prong design and it feeds into the quad exhaust performance system on this AMG CLA 45. One thing I do have about the exhaust is that the tips are fake. This is really just a dual exit exhaust, and Mercedes kind of just livened it up on the back end because 4 tips look cooler than 2 tips. But beyond that, now let's take a listen to what this AMG sounds like. Okay, so now we're on the front end again. I've got the hood popped open, and this is where all the magic happens. It's the M139 engine, codenamed by Mercedes. It's a inline 4-cylinder turbocharged engine making 382 horsepower and 354 pounds-feet of torque. It's the world's most powerful mass-produced 4-cylinder engine. Now I know there's the more powerful S version of this motor, but that car's not sold in the United States. The version in the CLA 45 has a 7,200 RPM redline, which is impressive for a forced induction engine, a 0 to 60 time of 4 seconds flat. It weighs almost 3,700 pounds. The engine is mated to an 8-speed double clutch transmission, and the engine flows through and puts power to the ground using an all-wheel drive system. Now, because the CLA 45 is a rather small car, it's not light, it's small, and it's a 4-cylinder, it actually gets pretty good gas mileage. 20 in the city, 29 on the highway, for a combined average of 23 miles per gallon. So that's pretty good considering that this car has almost 400 horsepower. Now, beyond just the engine being somewhat of an engineering marvel or masterpiece or whatever you want to call it, the other thing I wanted to talk about is how it's laid out here. Now, typically what you see is the turbo being mounted down underneath or somewhere in the front, and in the case of Mercedes they have the hot V design, but this is only a 4-cylinder and you can't mount the turbos in between 4 cylinders because it's a straight 4. So the turbo is actually mounted behind the engine. It's a really interesting place to put it. Now, Mercedes does that because they want as much air feeding into the engine, so they put that in the front. But the turbocharger is mounted behind there. It looks pretty cool. It's got a little brace on top of it. And of course, Mercedes one-man, one engine. This one is built by Marcel Bichot. I hope I pronounced that properly. And that's pretty much the engine on the CLA 45. All right, so now I'm on the interior of the CLA 45, and this is a really cool interior. I'd just like to describe it in one word, and that's cool. So let me give you a little bit more details. Starting off with the doors. The door is actually a frameless design. So it doesn't have the frame around the window, so that's pretty interesting. Then moving along to the actual door itself. The door handle is an aluminum piece. The grab handle to close the door is actually a really cool design. I like it a lot. On top of that are the seat adjustments. Below that is a very generously sized storage area. It's actually split, and one part of it acts as a cup holder, and then the rest of it is a storage map. You have heated and ventilated seats. That serves as a segue into the seat that I'm sitting in. This is the AMG Performance seat. The heated and ventilated function is optional on these seats. These seats are optional, and I have to say that they are probably one of the most comfortable performance seats I've sat in quite some time. They're very similar to what I've experienced in the Audi TT RS. They are a little softer or a little nicer to you compared to what you see in the AMG GTR, but structurally they feel the same. Now moving forward to the steering wheel. It's mechanically adjustable. It is not electronic. It goes in and out, up and down. Let me lock that. And this steering wheel is one of the more interesting things about this AMG CLA 45. First and foremost, it's the optional wheel. It's the AMG Performance steering wheel, and it's covered in Alcantara, which is not my favorite thing, but it looks cool. Going beyond that, let's talk about a little bit more of the details. The highlight item on this steering wheel is the AMG drive mode selector. It's very Porsche-ish. You've got this little knob here on the right that allows you to cycle between comfort, sport, sport plus, individual, slippery. This is really convenient if you don't want to mess with the infotainment. And then to the left of that, you have the individual adjustments for the suspension and the AMG driving dynamics. So this is really cool. The even cooler thing about this is that it's a little screen. It's an LCD to the multi-control buttons up here. It's a very clustered area. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but nothing out of the ordinary. You have the cruise control settings to the left, and then you have the infotainment controls on the right hand side. It allows you to answer a call, reject a call, raise the volume, skip a track, all the normal stuff that you're used to. Then you come to the paddle shifters. Mercedes does really nice paddle shifters. These are either all aluminum or all magnesium, but unlike you see in other manufacturers, the front of them are metal, and in the back what you see is a plastic piece. Mercedes is not doing that. They're giving you an all metal piece. It feels very solid in the hand. They're not really satisfying to hear. They're not really making a cool noise or anything, but they're very satisfying to feel, and they're very satisfying to use. And then we move on to the transmission selector inside the steering wheel. And I'm not really used to this. Typically, you're used to like something down here in the center console, but Mercedes has it mounted up here. So you put your foot on the brake, you pull it down all the way, that puts you into drive. You pull it up all the way, that puts you into reverse. If you do a slight flick, that'll put you into neutral no matter which direction you're going in. And then the button, you push that in, that puts you into park. So it's kind of interesting. It's not a column shifter. It's mounted on the column, but I don't know, maybe it is a column shifter. Now moving on to the overall layout and the dash. This is one of the cooler interior layouts I've seen in quite some time now. The dash is kind of flat, but you have flanking air conditioning vents that are absolutely beautifully designed. They're a metal piece. They have 360-degree movement. You can pretty much adjust them any way that you like. Now let's look at the infotainment screen. The gauges are absolutely stunning. I really like what Mercedes has done here. There are a lot of intricacies inside the gauge cluster, but it's got all the information you need. You don't really need to take your eye off this center section of the gauge cluster. All right, so now let's look at the infotainment screen. I forgot to mention the screen sizes. There are two 10.25-inch screens in this CLA 45. The infotainment screen itself is a touch screen. It's very responsive. The screen itself is extremely crisp. The graphics are absolutely fantastic. The layout is pretty good. I actually like it a lot. I think this one looks really nice. It's modernized very nicely. The ability to control it, you have this touchpad controller down here that has haptic feedback. Every time you scroll through the infotainment, it actually vibrates. You have the ability to turn that off if you don't like it, but it's a nice thing to give you feedback when you're cycling through the infotainment. After that, you have the typical AM, FM, Sirius, satellite radio, Bluetooth, all those things are built into this. Now, one really cool thing about these seats, they have something called seat kinetics, and what it does is you have the ability to adjust certain things, like it moves the seat while you're driving, and you can adjust the duration, how long you want it, how short you want it. Do you want the backrest to move? Do you want the seat surface to move? So it's something that I had never seen before. Now, before coming to the rest of the interior, I want to look up and I see a full panoramic sunroof here. So this is a really cool piece, and it livens the interior up significantly. And then coming down to the climate control system, you do have great quality there. All of the pieces feel really good. The feedback is good. It looks like all of the buttons here are made out of metal. They are really nice. Of course, it's a dual zone system, and it gives you all of the things that you would expect out of a typical climate control system. Moving down, you have a very big storage area here. It doesn't look like it has a cover, so it's just open all the time. Moving from there, you have a 12-volt outlet, and then you have a lightning cable or USB-C type adapter. Then coming down, you have two cup holders, and then coming to the center section here, because you don't have the transmission controller here, this is a very cleaned up space. You have the trackpad that controls the infotainment screen. You have the dynamic controller, which allows you to switch through the modes, and then you have several buttons here. The volume here on the right hand side, navigation, radio, telephone. The center console is nicely padded. You open it up and there's a fair amount of storage. I see another USB Type-C connector there. So that's the front of the CLA 45. I gotta say that Again, this is one of the coolest, most modern looking interiors I've seen in quite some time. Quality is also very good. The metal pieces, everything feels and looks premium. I can't really pick an area and say, oh wow, look, that's plastic. So this is actually a really, really nice interior. All right, so rounding off the interior, now I'm in the back seats, and I gotta say that this is a pretty generous back seat. It's not cramped. I'm sitting behind myself. I'm 5'10", and I've got a lot of room here for my legs. As far as the roofline goes, I can tell you that as I sit up straight, my hair is touching the roof, but my head is not touching the roof. My scalp is not touching the roof. But it is somewhat of a, I don't know, it feels a little weird. So beyond that, I have 2 air conditioning vents here. It is not 3-zone. I do not have the ability to control any of the climate from back here. I do have 2 additional USB Type-C inputs here, which is really good because now everybody needs a charger. And that's pretty much it back here. I'm actually pleasantly surprised on the amount of room here. The only thing I would ding is the roof. I wish it was a little bit higher. If you're shorter than I am, you will not have a problem, but I think that's to be expected because of the sloping roof in the CLA 45. All right, so now we're on the interior portion of the review, and like I always do, I want to show off the key. This is a very impressive unit. It has a nice weight to it, and the materials are good. There's no plastic on this key. Here's a look at it. There's the key. You see it says AMG there. Hopefully it's focusing properly, and that's the back. But this is something you won't be able to feel, but I can tell you that this key has a pretty nice weight to it. It's a really impressive key, something you don't really see nowadays. Okay, now moving along, now the visibility. I can tell you that I have no issues with visibility. I do have blind spot monitors. I do have a very clear front and rear camera, so I don't have any visibility issues. Over my shoulder, I have nothing bothering me there. Over the passenger side shoulder, I don't have anything bothering me there. Even though the B-pillars in the CLA 45 are pretty wide, I don't have any issues whatsoever. I mean, I'm not surprised. This is a 4-door car. Typically in 4-door cars, if you have your mirrors adjusted properly, you're not really going to have any visibility issues. All right, next thing before I get started with the driving portion, I have the window sticker here. This is a very expensive car, $73,665. The suggested retail price of this car is $54,800. So if I'm doing my math correctly, that's almost $20,000 in options. And this car has basically everything. It's got the 19-inch wheels I talked about, the steering wheel, the AMG Performance one, the Performance seats, the AMG Ride Control, the driver assistant package, the AMG Night package, the AMG Aerodynamics package, and also has the option to raise the top speed from 155 to 167. Not that you're going to go that fast, or very few people are going to go that fast. So yeah, this is a pretty expensive car, $73,655. So that's that. Now let's turn the car on and let's go for a drive. Foot on the brake, engine start stop button. Fires up. It's actually got to turn the radio down. Okay, let me put my seatbelt on. All right, so here we go. So as far as comfort goes, I think it's as you would expect a AMG level car. The suspension is firm. Even in comfort mode, you do feel the road coming through in the steering wheel. And the steering wheel is actually pretty good. It feels absolutely fantastic in the hand. I love the shape of it. But the feedback it also gives you is pretty good. The firmness is good. It's not too jello-y. Sometimes when you go in comfort mode in certain cars, it just becomes so loose. And I'm glad to see that that's not the case in the CLA 45. This is actually really good steering. Now, of course, everybody is wondering, what about the power? So let me put this in, let me put this in Sport. Actually, let's put it in Sport Plus. And man, I can tell immediately the steering wheel gets tighter. Okay, so I'm gonna come to a stop really quickly. Foot on the floor. little bit of lag. Oh, it sounds really good actually. Oh, I just lost all my stuff in the back. It actually sounds really, really good. There is turbo lag. There's definitely turbo lag there. I can feel once the car hunkers down and the turbos spool up, then I really feel the push. Is it fast? Yes, it is 100% fast. The backfires that you get from the exhaust are extremely satisfying. In addition to that, the transmission is very intelligent and the shifts are unbelievably smooth, and they have a certain crispness to them. They feel actually really good and very satisfying, if that's actually a thing for transmission feel. Okay, now I'm gonna put this back in comfort mode, but to round off the sport mode, I drove it off camera a little bit, but all I can say is that you won't be disappointed. The only thing that I typically get disappointed, and it's kind of no different here, is there is turbo lag here. But beyond that, the whole sporty feel of it is actually very, very good. All right, so what about the rest of it? Is this a good car for $73,000? I mean, there are a lot of things that you could probably skip when you're speccing this out. Like, I personally do like the AMG night package. I do think the aerodynamic package is pretty cool. The seats are actually really, really good. Even though I haven't sat in the regular seat, these seats I believe are $1,500, so they are well worth the price of admission if you're on the fence for them. The infotainment is really good. The comfort is not the best. You shouldn't expect a comfortable, supple riding like a 7 Series or an E-Class or an Audi A6 type of ride here. This is a full-fledged AMG car. It has magnetic suspension, so you do have the ability to make it as hard and as soft as you like, but you should check your expectations at the door if you think this is going to be a luxury cruiser. It's comfortable, but it's not. Check your expectation, I guess, is all I gotta say. Overall, do I like this car? Yes, I do like this car a lot. I like the styling of it. I'm very surprised on how the interior looks. This is probably what surprised me the most about the CLA 45. The interior is of extreme high quality. The touch points, everything, the steering wheel, the seats, everything feels high quality in here. You will not be disappointed. It's not to a point where, oh, I paid $60,000, $65,000, $70,000 and I got a bunch of plastic on the interior. So yeah, is it a good car? Yes, absolutely. If it was mine, I would skip some of the options here to bring the price down a little bit. But overall, it is a fantastic car. The design is good. The driving feel is as you would expect in a car without a manual transmission and with a smaller displacement engine. It's plenty fast. It does have turbo lag. The transmission is very good. You do have a panoramic sunroof, so the infotainment is good. The technology is good. So very minor complaints that I talked about in the review, but overall, great car. So again, thank you to Keys Mercedes for allowing me to review this car. I've linked their information in the description below, so please give Alex a call and he will gladly take care of you. But thank you for watching this video. Until next time, drive steady.